Hey, what's going on? This is Brandon.
Hey, this is Dave.
This is Joshua.
And hey guys, this is John Campopiano. I'm a filmmaker and psyched to be talking with PVD Horror.
Hi, this is Bailey Edwards, and I play Jacob in the movie Mothers of Monsters.
And I am Chusia. I'm the writer and director of Mom, Mothers of Monsters. And tune in to PVD Horror. Shut off the lights, crank up the volume, and enjoy.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We are joined here today with John Campopiano, and we are going to be discussing some of his film projects and his documentaries that he's worked on. Most of you guys will recognize his name from the Unearthed and Untold Pet Sematary documentary. But just to start things off, John, thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we figured we would just get started with like what we do with most of our guests and just ask you kind of like, what is your relationship with the horror genre? Like what films are, kind of got you into it, and, what's like your favorite subgenre, I should say.
Yeah. So, growing up, I was an only child. And so I had a lot of friends in my neighborhood. I grew up in Pawtucket. And so I had good friends in the neighborhood who had like older brothers. And so really, I think the kind of the gateway to horror for me was through the older, the siblings of my friends that would rent stuff and show us movies. It was like Friday the 13th, all the classic stuff, Halloween. And so we were like too young to see most of that stuff. But I think that they got a kick out of like showing us the really gory stuff and freaking us out as little kids. And so that was kind of like the beginning. And also like Jaws was one of those movies that they showed. And I remember being a kid and finding out that it was filmed in, Massachusetts and on Martha's Vineyard. And so when I was little, I would go with, my friends and their parents to the vineyard and we'd go see, it's Amity Island, right? Like Martha's Vineyard has not changed at all. And so it felt like we were like stepping into that movie. And so I think like, the 80s slashers and Jaws were really kind of like my gateway into the horror genre initially. And I mean, since then I've gotten into like a lot of subgenre, stuff. I think the last 6 or 7 years, I've been really interested in like more like horror films for like teenagers and like families, like kind of the stuff that I grew up with, like Little Monsters and Gremlins and The Gate, and like stuff that was made kind of tongue in cheek. It wasn't like gory over the top rated R, but it was like PG-13 and had like kind of a little bit for the adults and the kids.
Sure.
And as an adult looking back on those films, they've been like a lot of fun to revisit. So lately that's kind of been my jam.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, those are some great films you just brought up, because I also do the same thing. My kids are into horror now, so we go back and we just sit there and watch films like that. They love The Gate, Monster Squad, everything like that. So it's, it's the same experience. Like I said, like before, I grew up watching it with my grandmother, so now I'm just doing it with my kids, and it's, we love it.
Yeah, and it's kind of a different experience revisiting those films as adults, because you pick up on stuff you never picked up on as a kid. And a lot of the times, like, at least in my experience, I found that a lot of those films are a lot darker than I remember them. Like a lot of those films deal with like, being bullied as a kid, or like, divorce in the house, or like drug addiction or death, or losing a relative. So it's kind of like, they can be pretty intense, so I don't know, it's been really cool to revisit that subgenre over the years.
Yeah.
That's such a funny concept. Sometimes you watch a film and it's, you're like, oh, it's not as scary as it was when I was little. But then sometimes you watch it and it's the exact opposite, where you're like, wow, that was really dark. And I watched that on repeat as a kid. So that's always an interesting concept out there. So, John, we were noticing that you're big into film location.
Yeah. That's like, again, it started, I think, with Jaws when I was a kid, going to the vineyard, Martha's Vineyard, and seeing, a lot of the locations where they filmed Jaws that look really remarkably similar. And then over the years, I've just enjoyed going to, seeing places where movies that I love were shot. And, for me, it's kind of funny. It's like, especially if it's a movie that I really love, like Rosemary's Baby, for example. Like my buddy and I spent a weekend just kind of like running around New York City trying to find the locations from that film. And obviously you've got to hit up Ghostbusters if you're going to be in New York and stuff. So for me, it's kind of like, it's like stepping into the movie, like, especially if it's a movie you love, like, you can watch it over and over again, but it's hard to like get closer. And so I feel like I'm kind of like stepping into the television in a way, when I see these locations and, matching them up and trying to do recreations and like step in the exact spot that somebody in the movie was in. And I don't know, for me, I get a kick out of it. And I've met people online that, do the same kind of thing all around the country and all around the world, really. And it's super cool to see other people doing that stuff. So yeah, I really dig doing that.
Yeah. I think we kind of collectively do that as well, just in like, I don't know, whenever we're on trips.
Got thrown out of New Jersey, brand.
Yeah, we had gone down to where they filmed Friday the 13th. So the camp that they used, how they use it for the Boy Scout camp. So that weekend they were doing like tours and everything over there. And so we were just trying to go up there to try to figure out, like what was going on, how it was going. And then one of the guys just pulled up to us and said, "You guys got to get out of here." So we're like, "Oh, damn, come on." But at least we have that memory. It's like, how many people can just sit there and just say, "Hey, I was kicked out of Camp Crystal Lake,"
Oh, totally. Yeah, I know. It's the reactions you get from people run the gamut. I mean, we can talk about the It doc later, but when we were up in Vancouver filming that, there were some people that like invited us into their home, like houses that were used in the miniseries and stuff. And so it ranges from that to like, having the cops called on you. So it's fun. It's exciting too, So
Did you know that the Conjuring house, the original house, you can now go into that house?
You can go into it. No kidding, really?
Yeah. So a couple of our buddies in Rhode Island, Evil Examine podcast, the whole crew went up there and stayed the weekend. So the guy that owns the Conjuring house, the original house, he rents it out so people can stay there, and him and his family stay in the barn or something. So I didn't know if you were aware of that.
Wow, that's super cool. Dope. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. We talked about going. And then I chickened out. That's how that went.
It's smart though that he's like monetizing it. I mean, like I've always, sure. I feel like now in the last few years, I mean, they had a big Jaws fest in 2005 down on Martha's Vineyard, and I feel like since then they like the Vineyard has sort of embraced it. But in the 90s, growing up, going to the Vineyard, trying to see where Jaws was filmed, I mean, it's like they wanted to forget about it. They didn't embrace it at all. And I was always kind of like, man, like you could make a killing, just sell Jaws T-shirts or $10 to take a tour around the vineyard to see where it was filmed. And, some places just aren't into it. They're not into the attention, I guess, the tourism.
Smart business. Blairstown, New Jersey is literally a hole. And they do so much business from Friday the 13th. I look at some of those same things and I'm like, you'd be a fool not to, but that's just me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, I also noticed that you're a big collector of like VHS tapes and, old things to certain films. Like what's your favorite thing that you have in your collection?
Oh man. Well, it's funny. I've been kind of like downsizing that collection a little bit the last 6 months. I've only ever been a collector and it started to get to a point where I felt like the collection kind of like owned me a little bit. And so I was like, man, I sort of need to like purge some of this stuff. And so I've been kind of like weeding some of that stuff out. But I mean, I think definitely my favorite piece is a screen worn Tim Curry Pennywise suit from the miniseries. That's got to be the crowning jewel in the collection. I was lucky to get that when we were on location in Vancouver, 2017, filming the documentary on the miniseries. And we interviewed the costume designer and she showed up with it like unannounced. And she had said, "Oh, I had this in my costume archives all these years, for 30 years. And she knew that I was like a huge fan of the miniseries. And so she brought it to the interview and she, gave it to me after her interview, which was unbelievable, so super cool of her, really generous. And so, yeah, that's got to be my favorite piece for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. I heard a rumor that you sleep in it every night. Is that true?
I can confirm that rumor. My wife can confirm that. So yeah, of course I sleep in it, definitely. Yeah. So that's cool. I mean, it's unfortunate, it hangs in a closet because, we only have so much space and I'm not sure that I could get away with having that on a mannequin in the living
room. Although that would be amazing as well.
That would be incredible. Yeah. Incredible. I mean, it was cool, man. Before COVID hit, I was doing some of the conventions and bringing it around with some of my collection and like we had it on a mannequin and people could come take pictures with it and check it out. And we did Rhode Island Comic-Con in 2018. I was over in the UK a couple times with the cast from the miniseries and had it on display. So like, once I got it, I said, man, I don't want this just like hanging in a closet. I want, fans to be able to check it out and see it and stuff. So hopefully after COVID, we can start doing that stuff again.
That's awesome. Yeah. Did you ever go to any of the Rock and Shocks?
Yeah, just as a fan though. I never like appeared or did anything there. Okay. But yeah, I went every year, for like 6-7 years probably.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you did the short film Georgie. Was that suit in the short film? Was that the same
part of it was? Yeah, part of it. We originally thought we would do the whole thing and then I chickened out. Like I was like, because we had to have Tony like being really physical and we had like makeup on him and stuff. And I started to like get a little freaked out about it tearing, because it's pretty like it's pretty fragile, especially like the zippers in the back and stuff. Like it wouldn't take much to just tear that material. And so the neck piece, like that kind of like funky, like almost Victorian clown like neck collar that Tim wears in the miniseries, that's in Georgie, that's the original one. And then the vest too that he wears is the original one too. But everything else was we had to have it, made, a duplicate made, because I chickened out. Yeah.
Oh, I would have been a nervous wreck too. I don't blame you. So, all right. So you got to fill us in this Boston Yeti thing. When you hit us up and you were like, "That was me," we're like, "Wait, what?" Can you explain to our listeners about what the Boston Yeti was about and kind of how that came about?
Yeah. So this was, I guess that was 2000 and I don't remember the year, 2015. Anyway, a bunch of years ago. It was that year we had like blizzard after blizzard here in New England. In January through March, I think it was. And I had this Yeti costume already from Halloween. I had gone as, a Yeti the year before or something. So I had that hang out in the closet. And it was the night before the first blizzard hit. And like all the news was just like doom and gloom. I think they were calling it like snowpocalypse. Like they had all these like ridiculous names for like this epic blizzard that was coming. And I was like, oh man, like maybe I should just like put this suit on and go walk around the neighborhood. Like, that'd be really funny. Like, I was just like, that'd be really funny. We were just like my wife and I were just like having beers. And I was like, I'm going to go put the suit on and walk around the neighborhood. And so that's what I did. And the local news channel, NECN, was like, oh, tweet us photos, your photos from the blizzard. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to make a little Twitter account and tweet these photos to the news station. And within a matter of like an hour, they had retweeted it and it had gotten like hundreds of retweets. And I was just like sitting there, just kind of like watching this like unfold on Twitter, just sort of like dumbfounded. And then by like 2 a.m, I had gotten an email from Good Morning America, and they were like, hey, can the Yeti write like Good Morning America in the snow and tweet that to us? We'll put it on air in the morning. And it really just blew up. And so that whole winter, I was kind of like going out and like people were like looking for me and snapping photos, and it like made the Associated Press, I mean, you name it, it went global, like in the media. It was hilarious. And so subsequently the winters after that, I was doing like a lot of like, charity stuff. So like I partnered with our like local MSPCA and did like a big fundraiser for like the animal shelters and like, just like a lot of like kind of cool stuff that I thought would be really fun. And yeah, it's kind of like, I think they refer to the Yeti as like the unofficial mascot of Boston. And I did this whole video shoot with our Mayor Walsh, where they had me downtown, and it was hilarious. And so, yeah, it's kind of like been like a, another like total accident that this thing kind of went viral and became like a thing. But
that is awesome. Spreading winter cheer.
There you go, man. Yeah.
We need a Yeti right now.
Yeah. Hey, since you're going to be moving to Rhode Island soon, maybe you can just start off with the Rhode Island Yeti.
There you go, man. Yeah.
Get that going.
I'll throw a Benny's t-shirt on him. It'll be great.
Yeah.
You can't mention Benny's anymore. They're out of business. People get mad.
Really?
Rest in peace, Benny's.
You mentioned Benny's. The state offered to buy Benny's, and the owners were like, no. And people were like hurt by it because they've been here forever. You know what I mean? It's a Rhode Island thing.
I know. Yeah. I mean, we had a Benny's right up the street from me where I grew up in Pawtucket. So we would walk there all the time, my dad and I. And so good memories there. I've got a t-shirt upstairs. So nice. I should have said a Greg's t-shirt. I meant to say, we'll put a Greg's t-shirt on.
Get your death by chocolate cake and you walk around.
Exactly.
So if you're going to be the Yeti, don't do it in South County. They have the Bigfoot hunters down there. Make sure you're in Providence. Just an FYI.
Make sure. Yeah. I'll walk down Thayer Street. Nobody will even notice me. It'll be fine.
I can't believe you even mentioned that street. That's awesome.
I went to school right around there. So I mean, that was like my old stomping ground.
Nice.
Yeah, there was some good dealers down there when I was a kid.
My wife and I were down there. I was like, oh, Kind Connection's still there. That's cool.
Kind Connection. So John, tell us a little bit. You were explaining about the PBS American Experience that you had worked on before the show. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, one of the things I've always really been interested in is like monsters and creatures. And when I was a kid, I was always into like UFOs and cryptozoology and stuff like that. And so I remember like years ago seeing these photos from Nantucket back in the 30s of this massive sea serpent that like washed up on the beach. And I remember just like being like, what the hell was that? And then like I'd forgotten about it. And years later, I remembered it and tried to find it online, like to try to find that photo. So I found the photo and ended up learning more about what that was all about. It was like this like elaborate stunt that was put on by this guy named Tony Sarg. And Tony Sarg is not a household name, but he is the guy that designed the original balloons in the Macy's Day Parade that we see every year. And he was this like super, super creative guy. And he used to live on Nantucket. And so he like concocted this hoax where he had like people spreading rumors in the local Nantucket media about fishermen seeing stuff out to sea and whatever. And just like a really cool regional story. And he had this float wash up on the beach one morning in Nantucket in the summer. And then people realized that it was a big hoax and it became, you know, kind of a local little story. But I thought that was really, really cool. And so I ended up interviewing a guy down in Connecticut who actually runs, if you can believe it, they have a puppet arts program. You can get a master's degree in puppet arts at the University of Connecticut. And this guy is the director of that program and knows a lot about Tony Sarg. And so I interviewed him, and I interviewed a woman who has since passed away, who was a puppeteer back in the 60s. And she came up like under Jim Henson and all those guys. And she also lived on Nantucket in the 30s and knew Tony Sarg when she was a little girl and remembered this hoax. So I interviewed the two of them about this event and about Tony, and put this short film together with a colleague of mine, Eric Gulliver, and produced this short doc about this, you know, the sea serpent hoax, and Tony Sarg and PBS American Experience put it on their website. It's still streaming now. You can check it out. It's about 8 minutes long. It's not super lengthy or anything. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how that came about. But it sort of ties in a lot of my interests, right? Like New England and local legends and monsters and stuff. So it's kind of seemed like a natural project for me to do.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds like you have like an interest in, like you said, like unearthing these like legends, or just like what the real story is behind things that you've seen. So like, where do you think that comes from as far as like your passion for that? Do you have like a film that sticks out to you that you've seen that like really kind of like started you down this path with like the documentary filmmaking stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think my interest, like I just dig, like I feel like if I find it interesting, or if I think it's cool, like hopefully somebody else will too, you know? And so like in a lot of ways, like the Pet Sematary documentary is a perfect example. It's like that project started like as me as a fan, right? Like I just, and my good buddy Justin White, who I made the doc with, like we were just fans, you know? Like I wanted to go to Maine and see where they shot Pet Sematary and see the locations and kind of just do that for me. And that project obviously took on a whole nother kind of life of its own. But, you know, I think probably Pet Sematary is one of them, Jaws for sure. There's a really cool movie that Shout Factory actually just finally re-released on Blu-ray last year. I did some special feature work for them for like the extras, but it's called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And if you don't know it, it's it's awesome. It's such a cool movie. And it's shot all down in Connecticut. It's super atmospheric. There's like no blood in it. You know, it's like a psychological thriller really, but that's another movie that kind of like piqued my interest. And I think, you know, that's just kind of like where it started, like the thrill of the hunt, right? Like finding materials and stuff from films and wanting to share it with people, you know, and, you know, people that are, you know, have a similar interest in whatever. So I think probably that's kind of where it started.
Speaking of Let's Scare Jessica to Death, I'm assuming you've visited the house.
Yeah, a couple of times. I think they're tearing it down. Somebody messaged me on Instagram a while ago and said that like somebody bought it, or, you know, obviously it's like condemned. It's been empty for years. But yeah, I think it's either getting torn down or something, which would be a shame because it's a beautiful house. You know,
it really is
Victorian house.
Yeah. I got to go inside of it about 6 years ago. And there was all these creepy little props in there. There's like stuffed animals, a little tricycle. So had a field day taking some photos in there. But
that's super cool.
Yeah.
There's you should, if you're ever back in that area, you should check out, I forget the name of the building, but there's like it's like a historical inn that has been preserved. And I don't know what it functions as now, but it's where they shot all the interiors for Jessica.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you can check out. Yeah.
Awesome. So you had mentioned the Pet Sematary doc. So I figured we can kind of start off with like what that experience was like, how you got everybody lined up for that. I mean, that was a pretty incredible project to take on.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'll give you guys like the short version. You know, like I said before, it's like, you know, just having this interest in films and where they were shot. It was really me talking to my buddy Justin and saying, hey, Justin works for Channel 12 in Providence. He's a cameraman. And so like we've both kind of had like an interest in media, and we said, let's go check out the locations from Pet Sematary and see, what it's like up in Maine. And so we spent a weekend just kind of doing that just for ourselves. There was no intention of making a documentary. I mean, even growing up, I never had any ambitions to like make films or do anything like that. And so we just drove around Maine looking for the locations. We found a bunch. And in that process, we started talking to people, because Maine is like a different world, man. I mean, people are so friendly. We never met anybody that was like, what are you doing looking at our property? Or everybody was like super cool, wanted to talk to us about, what we were doing there. And a lot of the people we talked to, they were like, oh, hey, if you're interested in Pet Sematary or Stephen King, you should go talk to this person because, whatever, they were an extra in Pet Sematary, or they worked out on the crew, or they had some part in it. And so that first weekend trip turned into like another weekend trip, and then another one. And we were like, oh, maybe we'll do like a little YouTube video of the locations. And then the more people we talked to, we were like, oh, maybe we could do like a little documentary, and then that's when we started to get a little more serious about it and started reaching out to some of the cast. I don't remember the first person we interviewed was the woman who plays Missy Dandridge. She's the maid in Pet Sematary, the one that hangs herself. She has cancer and then hangs herself. We interviewed her first. And, it's hard when you're starting out on anything because, you don't have any work to point to. So we were like, oh, we're first time filmmakers, and you hope that people will like give you a shot, and that's kind of how it happened. And, you interview one person and they can vouch for you. And that's kind of how it happened. We interviewed Brad Greenquist, and he is close friends with Denise Crosby. So once we got Brad, and he was like, oh, these guys are legit, they're great. He could tell Denise, and that would, vouch for us. And then Denise mentioned that to Mary Lambert, the director. So it was kind of like a domino effect.
Yeah. Brad, we had Brad on an episode. So it was pretty cool just talking to him. And so it's funny now that everything aligns itself. So we had Brad Greenquist, and then last week we had Bailey Edwards, which is Anthony Edwards' son, and he played in the sequel to Pet Sematary 2.
Oh,
and now we have you on here, with the documentary. So it's just like everything's just Pet Sematary is just coming like full circle, and it's like one of our favorite films.
Absolutely, yeah.
Pretty cool.
I gotta say the documentary you did, there was a lot of things there for. If it was your first documentary, man, you didn't use any of the footage of the film, which I thought was really cool. And you went deep on that. You interviewed like the extras, the lady that did all the outside scenery, the green lady.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really well done. Were you expecting to really go that deep into it? I mean, but it still played out linear. Like it wasn't off course or anything. Like, were you expecting to make it that spot on or no?
I think it's like maybe the completist in me, and same with Justin, my film partner on that. It was kind of like, well, if we're going to get this person, we should get this person. And then if we're going to get that person, we should get this person. And as fans, which I think in hindsight, being a fan and doing a documentary, it can be a slippery slope, because you lose some objectivity with what you're making, but no, I don't think we had any ambition of it being that deep of a dive. In terms of the film footage, that was just kind of an accident because the original goal was to license footage and use it. And I had gotten an email from like the head of licensing at Paramount, and he quoted as something ridiculous. I mean, literally it was like $65,000 a second to license footage from the movie to use in the documentary, which I think was like his nice way of just making us go away really quickly because like and it worked. So we were, obviously really aware of not getting sued by Paramount. Yeah. So that forced us to get creative with some of the things that we had to do, like, hiring an animator to like animate some of the stuff or, whatever it was. Thankfully, we had a wealth of behind the scenes footage and photos that we could kind of use. But yeah, that was a challenge, I think, to not use any of the music or any of the film. But, we worked around it as best we could.
Too bad you didn't get Stephen King on there. I listened to a podcast a while ago, and you were telling the story of how you were supposed to have Stephen King on, but you had just missed it. And I was like, damn, that's got to be rough. So
yeah, it was rough, man. We basically did get him. I mean, the short version of that story is one of the contacts that we had up in Maine, who has remained a friend. He's like a local historian up there, and he knows everybody. And he knew Steve back in the day in the 80s, and he's an author as well. He gave us his summer address. So I think now King just vacations in Florida, but back at that time, he had another house in Maine. That's not that big, iconic one that everybody goes and sees in Bangor. So we got that address, and I wrote him a letter to that address, knowing that it would probably get directly to him rather than, the army of people that probably weed through his mail and throw shit out from fans or whatever happened. And about 3 weeks later, I got an email from one of his assistants saying, Steve got your letter. He'd love to give you an interview for the documentary. Once his main assistant, his primary assistant, is back in the office. I won't mention her. She's actually retired now anyway, so it probably doesn't matter. But she said once she's back in the office, she'll set up the interview. And she was a notorious stickler. She kind of like ran the show. So I knew that when I got that email, I was like, oh, she might see this and say, you know what, this is not worth his time. And sure enough, 2 weeks came, she came back from vacation and she emailed and said, oh, on second thought, Steve's not going to be available for an interview. So that was pretty crushing. So we almost got it. Almost got it. What can you do?
Yeah. So let me ask you, like, as you're digging in or unearthing all this information about Pet Sematary, you're probably finding out some cool things that you didn't know before, or just like some, weird behind the scenes stories. Is there anything for any of the listeners who haven't watched the documentary? Is there any stories that really struck you as interesting that you could share?
That didn't make the film?
Or no, just like ones that are in the film, but for anyone who didn't see the film.
Well, it's funny, like all these years later, I still I'll get messages from people occasionally that they'll say, oh, I had no idea Zelda was played by a guy. Yeah. I think, I take it for granted just because I worked on the project, but I think a lot of people don't realize that was a guy. So I forget that. I forget that piece of information pretty frequently though, because I did know that, but like when you watch it, it's like, you don't think that it doesn't come to your head right away, but yeah, that is odd. And the other cool thing about it is, and it makes me, kind of proud of Stephen King and just to be a New Englander and stuff, is that, a lot of King's films before Pet Sematary were set in Maine, but were not filmed in Maine. They were not shot in New England. I mean, you just watch like Cujo or Salem's Lot. I mean, you see that landscape, and if you're from here, that's the Pacific Northwest. That's not New England. Yeah. So King said when they approached him and said, "Hey, we want to make Pet Sematary into a film," his big stipulation was first that he had to write the screenplay, which we'll let the history decide whether that was a good decision. But the other thing was it had to be shot in Maine. He wanted to bring all that money and all that exposure to Maine, which is really cool, because it brought millions of dollars into that area. So That's a cool little, tidbit too about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody wants to know, how much bad stuff did you hear? Everybody wants the meat, man. If you're going up there weekend after weekend talking to people, not everybody is nice 24/7, So, and I'm sure like a lot of people, you don't want to say anything. A lot of the people are still acting and stuff like that. So you don't really want to say anything, but how much bad stuff did you hear?
We heard some juicy stuff. I mean, we heard some stuff that if we had put in the film, we may have been in some legal, some questionable legal. I'll tell you guys like later, but there were some great stories. I mean, there's one cast member from that film that may or may not still have a warrant out in their name. So something tells me they probably are not visiting Maine on vacation anytime soon. We'll leave it at that.
Oh man,
statute of limitations is like 10 years, except on the theft of art, and I think it's arson. Mm. I looked it up one time for a friend. That's how I know.
Okay,
friend, yeah, Josh.
Good. Yeah, man.
Josh, he's like, all right.
We'll just leave that. We'll edit that.
All right. So, John, how did you come up with the short story for Georgie?
Yeah. So, let's see. So I had started back in 2016, I had gotten an email from a guy that I sort of knew on social media, but I didn't know him personally. His name's Gary Smart. Mm-hmm. Awesome guy. He runs Dead Mouse Productions in the UK. He's based in the UK. And he's put out a lot of similar documentaries. He put out a documentary out on Hellraiser a bunch of years ago called Leviathan. He and his team also put out a documentary about Fright Night a couple of years ago. So those are definitely worth checking out. And so I think he had started to have some interest in putting together a documentary about the miniseries It. And I had started to do some articles for like Dread Central and other kind of online publications interviewing some of the cast from It. And he knew I was a fan and whatever. And he saw these articles. So he reached out and said, hey, do you want to come on board and co-direct and write and produce with me a documentary about the miniseries? And so I said, definitely. So we started that in 2017. And part of that process was obviously trying to find as many people from the miniseries as we could to interview. And one of the people that we were struggling to find was Tony Dakota, who played Georgie in the miniseries. And one of the reasons we had such a hard time finding him is because that was a stage name. His first name is Tony, but his last name is not Dakota. And so it was really hard for us to find him. He was also in the process of going through some personal issues when we did finally find him. And we got the interview. And part of the process when we were interviewing Tony, one of the questions that I had for him was, would you ever want to get back into acting? Because he hadn't had an acting credit to his name since like 91, 92, something like that. And so he said, definitely, I would definitely love to get back into acting. I just don't know how to. Like, I don't even know where to begin. And so we had actually had a freelance videographer, Ryan Grulich, in Seattle shoot the interview with us. And I had messaged Ryan. I said, what if we wrote a short film for Tony where he could reprise his role as Georgie, and it would, put some money in his pocket, give him kind of like maybe another like a leg up to try to get back into the business, and just do something constructive, give him something positive to work on, because he was going through a lot of issues at the time. And so that's kind of how it came about. We had a little crowdfunding campaign, raised the money. I think more than a quarter of that just went right into Tony's pocket. We didn't make any money on it personally. And we wrote this like really far out, like psychedelic story, and shot it. And Fangoria premiered it for us online, which was super cool. Yeah. And now it lives on YouTube somewhere. And so it was a cool project, but we really wanted to do it to help Tony. It was kind of the impetus for doing it. So
that was cool.
I got that from the Guts guys.
Right on. Yeah, cool. Yeah, down in Texas. Those guys are great. Yeah.
Yeah, they're homies of ours. And I was like, oh, dude, I got to check that out. So shout out to you for doing their podcast. Shout out to them for having you on. It was real. They're cool guys, man. Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. They had Ryan and I on together. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like a cool experiment to do something strange. And it was, I had never written like fiction before. Like I was so steeped in like documentary film. And so to be able to just like have a blank canvas and like get as weird as we wanted and just do whatever we wanted to do was a really fun exercise. And it played maybe 6 or 7 film festivals that year. And so that was a lot of fun to kind of see it, play the festival circuit and get feedback. And so that was it was a cool experience. For sure. There was some shirts, I can't remember if it was Fright Rags or Cavity Colors that did like a Georgie shirt. Was that connected with the film? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Fright Rags. Ben Scrivens, who runs Fright Rags, stepped up and we did like a limited like Georgie hoodie and t-shirt like as part of the crowdfunding campaign, which was super, super cool of them to do. Yeah. And so that was a cool design. Cool merch. Too. There's a guy, do you guys know Theater of Creeps? Shane? Yeah. He's based out of Worcester. Yep. He did this killer Georgie enamel pin based on the design that we had made for the poster. So we did like a bunch of those pins and sold them and stuff. And yeah, it was like one of those things. You didn't do it to like get rich or anything like that. It was just to do it and do something creative and, put it out in the world. So it was fun for sure.
That's awesome. So now that you've done that and it got pretty popular, especially like you said, a lot of people stepped in and did a lot of stuff for it and with it. So I mean, if lightning strikes once, maybe it'll strike twice. Are you going to do any more, either short films like that or something along those lines, like nonfiction?
Yeah, for sure. Ryan. So Ryan and I have a script finished. It's for a short film called Peep, and we were hopefully going to film that last year. We had brought a couple people on to. Clint Howard is going to voice the villain of the piece, which is going to be really fun. And we were hoping to shoot that last year, but then COVID, kind of disrupt that. But we have a finished screenplay for a short film that Ryan and I want to do. It's based on an experience I had as a little kid. It's going to be shot exactly in that style that we were talking about before, like the Creatures for Kids stuff. It's going to be like a PG-13, like our kind of like a Goosebumps, basically. You know what I mean? And we're going to have like an animatronic creature built for it. And it's based on an experience that I had at a summer home. My grandparents had a summer house down in Westport, Massachusetts, when I was growing up as a kid. And so it's set down in Westport. Again, another New England monster story. So I can't escape it. So.
And you're gonna have a killer marshmallow Peep.
I know. Yeah, I know. I mean, maybe we'll put a Peep in there, man. Yeah, no, it's spelled just like it, but yeah, not about the candy. But we should probably put a Peep like somewhere, like an Easter egg in the back.
Yeah.
So I know that you're like big fan of the original films of Pet Sematary and It. What do you think about the remakes?
I thought the remakes by and large were pretty good. I mean, I thought there was a lot of really great moments in the new Pet Sematary. There were things that I probably wouldn't have done, but it is what it is. I thought that was fun to see that. And, the chapter 1 of It, I thought was great.
Yeah.
Also like the miniseries, it's kind of like by the time you get to part 2 and it's focused on the adults. I mean, for me personally, I don't care as much. Like it's seeing the kids in danger that I think is kind of more interesting personally. But, I was lucky enough to go out to LA for the premieres for both chapter 1 and chapter 2 and be there with people. And it was a blast. So I feel like my memories of those films are kind of tied up in that experience. So I've got a lot of love for those movies for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, we kind of talk about that a lot with the miniseries and It chapter 1 and 2, just as far as like the second one about the adults, it's like never really has been my favorite part of that film. I've always been like a bigger fan of the first half of it, watching the kids experience. I kind of agree on that. And the Pet Sematary remake definitely had some moments that were good. And then there were some things that I just wish they had done different, but Zelda is probably the thing that like, I wish they had done something different with the most, but it is what it is.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately there's like an expectation with a lot of that mainstream horror and both It chapter 1 and chapter 2 was, they were guilty of this as well. It's like the jump scare stuff. Like there's a lot of those kind of moments that like they're going for that jump in the theater. Yeah. And I think some of what Mary Lambert did really well, and the original Pet Sematary is deeply flawed as a film too, right? It's like not a perfect film at all, but I think it was like a slower burn and she kind of went for more of like the cerebral horror rather than like the kind of like gross out jump out moments. Mm-hmm. So that kind of took me out of the new Pet, but I mean, it was shot beautifully, it was shot beautifully. I think for It, what I've always wanted to see is for it to sort of be like a 10-part miniseries. Like I wish like a Netflix or an HBO would like get the rights and do like an epic 10-hour, 10-part series and tell that story in a really, really kind of drawn out, thorough way. I think that would be really awesome.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Maybe you can do it, man.
Do it up.
Maybe, man. Yeah, I see. I'm working on Turtles right now, but yeah, we should. That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Funny story. I cannot watch Pet Sematary anymore. Gabe looks exactly like my son. So I started watching it. I was like, I got to turn this off because I knew it was going to happen. So watching it, 20 years ago, as opposed to being a father, now I'm like, I can't watch this.
I'm sure. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people have said that to me over the years too. It's pretty bold. I mean, when you think about what they did, I mean, pretty taboo, I think, when you think about it. Maybe that's why, I don't know if that's why, like, it's not revered like a lot of the slasher films are, because it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like, it's sad. There's a lot of like melancholy about it where it's not kind of like this, like, Jason chasing you through the woods kind of thing, which is fun. It's scary, but it's fun. Pet Sematary is just kind of like a downer, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Just watching this grieving dad kind of process all the, this loss. It's a pretty brutal film.
Yeah.
Even the actors that were in it, I've heard numerous interviews where different actors that were in it were like, yeah, I watched it before, but now I can't watch it because now I have kids or, that kind of thing. So Stephen King really nailed it there. I got to tell you. So kudos to him.
Yeah. Well, it's like what he says, or a lot of authors say, it's like, you write what you know. Right. And I mean, he was just writing about something that happened to him. So it came from a real place, which is probably why it, if it's bullshit, people see through it. But if the story is legitimate and real, I think people pick up on it and it makes for a better film and book and, all that stuff.
So kind of like another, a segue into another Stephen King work that you had a project in would be the Pennywise, the story of It doc that you did. You want to talk about that a little bit and kind of like how that started up for you?
Yeah, well, like I said, Gary Smart with Dead Mouse Productions in the UK reached out. He knew I was a fan and was doing some writing about the miniseries. And I think he had seen the Pet Sematary doc. And so he invited me to join his team and co-direct and produce and co-write. And so we did it. We had a successful crowdfunding campaign, thankfully, back in 2017, and spent a week and a half in Los Angeles. And then we went up to Vancouver, which is where they filmed the miniseries, and interviewed cast and crew in both locations, and have spent a couple of years just tracking down behind the scenes content. Really the guy that deserves a shout out, and you guys should have him on your podcast because he's a wealth of information. He's done so many films. He's super, super interesting. A guy named Bart Mixon. And Bart Mixon designed the makeup and did all of Tim Curry's makeup. He's worked on RoboCop. I mean, look up Bart. He's still working in the business now. He works on all the Marvel movies. He's awesome. And so I had met Bart, and Gary knew Bart, and Bart had shot a lot of behind the scenes, like home movie footage on the set of the miniseries that he had never shown anybody. It's been on a VHS cassette in his basement for 30 years. And so that was like the impetus that kind of started that project. And so we had that stuff digitized, and, 3 years later, we're finally finishing it. It's been a really slow process, unfortunately, but we're getting really close to finishing it. And we've got something like 600 behind the scenes photos and 2 hours of footage. And we interviewed like 55 cast and crew members. So it's going to be pretty robust, I think. And we put out a couple trailers over the last few years, but yeah, it's going to be out this year for sure. And we're going to try to do the festival run. We've got a really great distributor in the UK who's a sales agent distributor who's helping us, get a good deal for it and, get it out to the masses. And so we'll do a physical release of that on Blu-ray, and also, hopefully get a good streaming package put together for that too. So
that's awesome. I feel like people are going to be chomping at the bit to be a part of that when that's ready to stream.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, obviously getting Tim Curry was a huge get for us. I mean, it was given his health, and, he's not known for doing a lot of interviews and stuff. So we weren't sure if we were going to get him. And once we got Tim, I mean, that opened up a lot of doors for us, so having him involved. And we also I knew when we started that, I wanted to kind of go into the history of clowns in general and like why clowns are scary. And obviously, John Wayne Gacy has a lot to do with that. And there's kind of like this whole subculture before it, before King even wrote the book, about why clowns are kind of strange and unusual. So there's kind of like a historical element to it. So I'm hoping it's going to be an interesting documentary for people. So.
Oh, I'm sure. Hey, Josh, do you think clowns are scary?
Oh, are you picking on me? Seriously? My brother is Chuckles the Clown, and he's a horror clown. And he had a local show here, and he's been invited to Rhode Island Comic-Con for 6-7 years in a row. Oh, here's your table. Come on down. So They bust my balls all the time because my brother.
That's awesome. Well, dude, I mean, the cool thing about that too is that, we wanted to give clowns a fair shake in this doc as best we could. So when we were in Los Angeles, we actually interviewed a professional clown, a really awesome guy who, he's a magician and he does all kinds of stuff, but he makes his living as a clown. He does a lot of charity work. He works in like local children's hospitals and stuff like that. And so we interviewed him, and getting his take on clowns being scary and the history of clowns and what King's book and miniseries did for the image of clowning is really cool. And so we've kind of woven his voice through the documentary as well. So we're not just beating up clowns, So,
yeah.
That's awesome.
I want to see a documentary about just a bunch of angry clowns that hate Stephen King. That would be an amazing little doc right there.
Yeah, seriously.
So, I mean, it's pretty amazing that you got to have Tim Curry be a part of this project. Anything to share about what that's like?
Oh God, you mean having him involved? What that was like?
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was like a dream come true for me and the guys too. I'm sure, to get him was incredible. And it was definitely, I think, the best interview experience I've had ever.
Did you get to go to his house?
We did go to his house. That's kind of how that worked. Yeah. We were invited to his house in Burbank. He lives up, outside LA. We spent the afternoon with him. They let us set up. We showed up, and there was like coffee and cookies and snacks and stuff for us laid out, which was so generous. And they even had iced coffee. As a New Englander, I was like, hell yeah, iced coffee. And so that was so cool. And he has like a team of people that kind of work for him and with him and stuff. And everybody was really cool. And he came out and we interviewed him, and just the whole thing. I mean, I had asked his assistant before we got there. I said, we can't show up empty handed. Like, what can we bring Tim as like a thank you? And so she's like, oh, he likes really nice red Italian wine. So we're like, all right, perfect. So we grabbed some nice wine on the way there, and just the whole thing. He was super cool, really, really funny, and just really, really easy to talk to. And so we left that day, and we just kind of like, we all went out for dinner and just had beers and just sort of like kind of sat like quietly, just sort of like absorbing. And we're like, oh my God, like what just happened? It was surreal, So that was super cool. He was very open and generous with his time.
That's amazing. It's one of those things where it's like kind of humbling or something. I don't know exactly what the right word is, but when you see some like these, people that you've looked up to, and they have these medical conditions, but like it's also kind of uplifting when you see them still enjoying their lives and like being part and like of, you know, still immersing themselves in this world with their fans and stuff like that. Like I think about Michael J. Fox and, you know, kind of like when I was growing up, someone I looked up to, but Tim Curry too. I remember seeing him at the Rhode Island Comic-Con, and I was like, that's awesome that he's still doing this stuff despite, you know, any health conditions he's struggling with. So it just kind of shows like how much this means to him too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, one of the visuals that I have like kind of burned in my brain when we were at his house was we were setting up, and it was funny. Like we were like a really talkative group. It was like 4 Brits and me, and everybody was always chatty. And that day we were just dead silent. We were just like setting up the lights and the backdrop. And like, we had Tim in front of a green screen, and we were trying not to break anything, but they were like, oh, you can rearrange the living room, whatever. And so we were like kind of doing that. And I remember looking up, and he has like this beautiful piano in his living room. And on the kind of where you would put the sheet music, he has drawings that fans have sent him of like all of his characters. So there was like, wow. Him as the devil, as Darkness from Legend and Pennywise, and obviously Rocky Horror. And so like, it's all these drawings that fans have sent him over the years that he just has displayed in his house, which I thought was like super cool.
That is amazing. That is actually really awesome. So no matter what happens with the film, you got that experience, which is like, I don't know, that seems almost priceless itself.
Oh, definitely.
The film will do well on its own, but like, I don't know, that experience is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I feel fortunate to have had that.
Now we got to get to the most important thing that you have ever done. So I was so excited about this. I'm a huge fan of Attack of the Killer Refrigerator. And we actually spoke about this, I don't know, like
a few weeks ago.
Yeah, actually it was like a couple months ago, but it's funny I brought this up. So I don't know if you're a tape trader, but back in the day we had the tape tradings, and whenever somebody got a film, we'd go to his house, watch it. And then, absolutely. Stuff like that. And Attack of the Killer Refrigerator was one of the big ones that everyone tried to see, but no one saw it. And Snapper was the other one. How did you even hear about this film?
So the guys, Mike Savino and Mark Vo, who are the guys that made Attack of the Killer Refrigerator, I met them years ago just because they're local. They're Worcester guys, and they're still in Worcester. And I had reached out to them, again, it was years ago, maybe a decade ago. And I'm sure it had something to do with the refrigerator, but we've stayed in touch. And a couple of years ago, maybe last year, I was asked to write for Scream Magazine, they're based in the UK. And so I've started writing for them. I'm like one of a few like US based guys that are writing for them. And one of the pieces I wanted to do, my first one for them, which hasn't even published yet, but was about Attack of the Killer Refrigerator. So I called up Mark and Mike and I said, hey guys, can I come to Worcester and interview you for a day and ask you questions about the refrigerator? And, they said, yeah, sure. And it actually happened to be the weekend of Rock and Shock, which was 2018 Rock and Shock. So we were hanging out at the convention, and Mark, as I'm leaving, basically to come back home, Mark was like, oh, and we tried to make this movie about a man-eating snapping turtle. And I was just like, it's like that moment in the movie, man. Like you take the needle off the record and everything stops. And I was like, what? Because like he knows I'm a Jaws fan. I'm hugely into like when animals attack movies. Like I love all that stuff and eco horror and stuff. So I was like, oh, that's really cool, man. He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So I didn't really think anything of it. So I went home, and then like a couple of days later, Mark started texting me these photos of the animatronic turtle head that they built back in 1990. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I was like, I said, man, Mark, this is really cool, man. He's like, yeah. We've got footage and all the dailies that we shot. They shot the whole thing on 16 millimeter. And then, of course, like the wheels, my wheels get turning, right? I'm like, man, wouldn't it be cool to tell the story of a film that never got made? Like I've been focused for years telling stories about movies that like we all love as horror fans. But like, what about a story about a movie that fell apart? I thought that could be really cool for a short documentary. And so that's just kind of how it started.
Dude, that's awesome. So they're like legends. I wish I had met them. Literally, I've been looking for Attack of the Killer Refrigerator for like 25 years. For some reason, you could never find it. And I found it on YouTube. Somebody wisened me up that YouTube shows films. So I looked on YouTube maybe last year or something. I finally saw it. And the Snapper, man, so the legend is that it was made, but no, it never distributed. and I don't know if you had seen pictures before, but maybe in the 90s, early 2000s, we saw a picture of like the snapping turtle head, but we never actually saw anything else. So I was so excited to watch this. Thank you so much for giving me the link to that. How was it to make that documentary? Like, how cool were those guys to hang with?
Oh, they're great. They're super great. And, I'm sure they would love to come on the show and talk to you guys, because they're writing. It may already be written. Actually, I'm going to blow up their spot here. It may already be written. Attack of the Killer Refrigerator Part 2.
Oh man.
And I know they're working on storyboards and stuff. So I'm sure that, they're super excited about what we did with the Snapper doc. And I'm sure that they would, so I could connect you guys super easily.
That'd be amazing.
No
Great.
problem.
You'd have to talk to Brandon and Dave, because I might be a fanboy on that one.
That would be, after watching that doc though, I'm a fanboy though. That's like the how low, like Worcester. I had no idea when I started watching it, and you were like, they throw out Worcester guys. I'm like, what? That's like right down the road. That's amazing. So to know that like that legend is so close, because when Josh told us that, Josh, you left out the big detail that it's like literally the state over. So,
well, I think Attack of the Killer Refrigerator was shot in Connecticut. So
it was shot in Worcester.
What was it? Oh,
yeah.
Damn, look at that. I got my facts wrong and everything.
No, that's cool. Yeah. It's shot in Worcester. I don't think they shot anything in Connecticut. I mean, maybe they shot something down there, but I mean, they made that movie for like $10, so I'm sure they couldn't go very far.
Hey, Josh, Connecticut's also a state over too. So yeah, it would have been a state over.
Yeah. For those of you who don't understand geography, there's Massachusetts. Rhode Island is literally the road in between Massachusetts and Connecticut. Yeah. So there you go. So another, like, I don't want to harp on this too much, because I know Brandon and Dave have other questions, but there's I'm a big fan of animal movies as well. I've done a lot of like shark. So not Shark Week, but there's World Shark Day, and I do literally 30-day marathons of World Shark Day, World Mosquito Day, World Snake Day. You name it, I've made week-long events of them. And I had heard that you were doing possibly a documentary on animals run amok. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, totally, man. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you can look it up. We have a Facebook page. Right now, the working title is Of Feather, Fur, and Fin, A History of Animal Attack Horror. And I'm working with a guy who's amazing. He's down in Australia, Lee Gambin. And you've probably heard Lee Gambin. And
I've heard that name.
Know it. You've heard of him?
Yeah, I can't think of it, but I know the name.
He's like the godfather of bonus features on Blu-rays. So like Shout Factory, Code Red, Kino Lorber, all these Vinegar Syndrome, all these cool companies that are putting out all this amazing like remastered stuff. He's on so many of those releases doing like audio commentaries. He's a film historian. He's written a ton of books. He's an authority on the subject. And so it's kind of a no-brainer that he and I would kind of come together and do a project. I'm actually co-directing that with Ryan Grulich, the guy I mentioned before, who I did Georgie with. So yeah, we're in pre-production on it right now. We've got a sizzle reel and all kinds of stuff that we're kind of shopping around. We're trying to go a different route rather than crowdfunding. We're hoping that we can entice, a company, maybe like a Shudder or somebody to come on board and help us make it. So we'll fingers crossed,
That's badass.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know earlier you mentioned like obviously being a big Jaws fan. What other eco horror movies are you a big fan of?
Oh man, I love them all, really. I mean, they all kind of have their own flavors. I love like Orca and Grizzly. I mean, even, a newer film. I kind of dig like the 70s, 80s, and 90s stuff. Mm. But, Cujo, like some weird ones like Kingdom of the Spiders or Frogs or, all kinds of stuff. I mean, what's the company? I think it's Severin. Maybe it's Severin put out the Killer Crocodile films, which are like these crazy Italian schlocky killer crocodile movies, which are a blast. All kinds of stuff, man. I dig it all the B movies, like literally like Hornets, like Wasp movies that came out, like Savage Bees and all that stuff. I dig it all, man. I have most of it too. Awesome. I collect all that shit. Yeah.
I was hoping you were going to mention Frogs. I love that film.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
Have you seen Sting of Death?
I have not seen Sting of Death. Should I check that out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure only Something Weird Video has it. It comes out disc, but it's about a killer jellyfish. I had it, but it disappeared with a lot of my movie collection over the years, but highly recommended. I think Something Weird Video has it. It's in the horror section. So
they put out some awesome stuff. Yeah, they put out a movie a while ago called God Monster of Indian Flats, which if you don't know,
I love that movie.
It's okay. So I can tell by the laughter that you know it. So good. Perfect. It's amazing. The other film, and I wonder if you guys ever watched it growing up in Rhode Island like I did. I used to watch Alligator all the time, like late at night. They would always have that movie. I don't know if it was TBS or one of the stations like had that always on late night, and I would always watch Alligator with my buddies.
That's the Toby Hooper one, right?
No, that's Crocodile, I think.
Yeah.
With Robert Englund. The Alligator is the one with Robert Forster. It's like where the turtle's in the sewer and comes out of the sidewalk, and like there's the epic scene at the end. It's like a wedding party, and like the alligator shows up and just like destroys everybody.
Yes. Oh, I remember that was on TV all the time. I can't remember what it was though.
I haven't seen this. This is it's from 1980.
Yeah, 1980,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, they made a sequel to it with Kane Hodder was in it and Dee Wallace, but the original with Robert Forster and Robin Riker, super great film, super awesome.
I gotta find these. Yeah,
it starts with like a little girl flushing an alligator down the toilet, like a baby alligator, and of course it ends up in the sewer, and you know the rest. It's pretty formulaic.
Yeah. That was the big thing back then, is alligators getting flushed down toilets or something and being in the sewer. I forget how that all started, but that was like a whole thing.
Exactly.
In the 80s.
Man, I just posted a film last month called Toilet Gator.
Toilet Gator. Sounds
Josh, don't, man. You're going to ruin your credibility here.
That makes it to the documentary, but.
Now, for our listeners, when can we expect for the Snapper doc to release?
So I'm hoping to. We're kind of in talks now. It's basically finished. We the cut that you guys saw, it basically the audio mix is basically finished on it, but we've got some more. A sound engineer is going to do a little more work on it, but it's basically done, and I think it has pretty good festival potential. So I definitely want to put it into some festivals. And we're kind of in talks right now to do a theatrical release, a virtual theatrical release with one of the kind of art house indie theaters here in New England. And hopefully that'll happen sometime soon. Maybe, people can rent it for like a weekend or even a week, maybe hopefully via that theater. So we don't have anything finalized yet, but that's kind of where it's going to. So hopefully in February, March, people will be able to check it out sometime soon.
Movie night.
There you go. Yeah. Short movie night. It's only about 29 minutes, but yeah.
It's 29 minutes well spent.
Yeah, well,
hopefully. I hope people agree. We'll see. You lose perspective when you work on something for a long time. It's just kind of, it's like, is this any good? Well, is anybody going to care? You have no idea. So
that's how we feel about this podcast every time we release an episode. Is anyone going to listen?
But it was cool though, just watching the two guys just talk about the love for just making films, and coming up with the effects and doing everything, and then how they put everything on the credit card. It was just, it was just cool just watching that, So hopefully everybody else that watches it when it releases, they'll have that same experience and for the love of horror.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm glad it resonated with you. I mean, that's kind of what we were going for. I mean, you had asked like what it was like to interview those guys. And I mean, we sat down with them and I knew that we were going to talk about Snapper, but I had no idea where the story would go. And I think after we shot the interviews and then started to put it together, I realized that the story for this short documentary anyway, it's kind of more like a buddy story. It's kind of like
I swear to God, I was going to say that. It's like a best friend story. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. It's like about these DIY filmmakers like that are close friends that have been creative partners for decades now, literally, that are just trying to like make cool stuff. And so it's kind of that story. And also obviously, I was really attracted to the idea of like shining a light on like regional filmmaking, that Massachusetts filmmaking in the 90s. I mean, what information is out there about it? I couldn't find much. So trying to tell a regional story about what was going on. And again, monsters, New England, man-eating creatures, it fell right into my wheelhouse. So
yeah.
That's so
a best buddy horror doc. It's a Hallmark story, really, right, Brandon? Brandon's all about Hallmark horror.
There you go. And the Spooky World connection was cool too, I thought.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Scott Andrews, the other guy who built all this stuff, super talented. I mean, I feel like if he had wanted to grind it out and stay in the industry, he probably could have. And he talked about off camera, he knew Tom Savini and all those guys like early in the convention days when those guys were still kind of like doing their thing. And I think had he wanted to stay with it, he probably, he definitely had the skill to do it. He built some really cool stuff on no money, basically, back in those days. So had he had a really robust budget, I'm sure he could have made some really cool stuff.
Hey, there's still work available. I know one of my brothers runs one haunted house in Rhode Island, and then a good friend of mine manages another one. Dude, they're always looking for props and stuff and people to help things work. That kind of work will never go away,
Hopefully not. Yeah, for sure. And actually, if you guys are in the spooky world, I've got a good buddy, Anthony, who's doing, he's starting he's actually already been in production, but they had to stop for a while because of COVID. He's doing a documentary about the history of spooky world.
That's cool.
Which, it looks like it's going to be really great. So that they've got an Instagram account and stuff like that. So that, that'll be like another regional horror story, which should be cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, all right. So John, as we kind of start to wrap up, I just wanted to see, is there anything other than the projects we talked about, or even just kind of like telling people how to check out these projects that you want to get into?
No, I think we covered it, man. I appreciate it, guys. That's like most of what I'm working on. And hopefully, we'll see what COVID deals us this year. Hopefully it slows down for people's health and hopefully industry, the industry can get going again and films can happen. And because we've got a lot of ideas and projects kind of like just waiting in limbo. So hopefully we can move on that stuff this year,
Yeah, for sure.
COVID 21 just came out on January 4th. It's the first horror movie I've seen this year.
No, 23, right? It's COVID 23.
No, it's COVID 21 for year 2021.
Oh,
wow.
Pay attention.
Sorry, Josh.
Yeah, man. And you did an interview with Robert Englund for a series that was supposed to take place or something. I had heard or read it somewhere, but I never really got the gist of it. Is that true?
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot to mention that too. Yeah. So Gary Smart, the same guy I mentioned, Dead Mouse Productions in the UK, he invited me nicely to come along and work on his next documentary project, which is called Icon, the Robert Englund story. And it's a biopic, basically. It's kind of like a traditional biopic about Robert Englund, the guy, the actor. And so we were out in LA shooting interviews for that. That would have been 2019, before COVID. And we've interviewed, you can check it. We've got a Facebook page and an Instagram account for that project as well. We've interviewed like 30, 40 people, Tony Todd, all the big names in horror. And then also a lot of the people that Robert's worked with over the years, Heather Langenkamp, and we're, looking at a lot of his movies that don't get a lot of exposure, as well. So it's not just going to be about Freddie. And we've interviewed like some of his relatives too. So we're trying to like paint a picture of who this guy is too. So that's in post-production now, maybe out this year, but probably next year that'll be out. So, something to look forward to there too. So
here's a question. In that documentary, did you talk about Incubus?
It's definitely going to be mentioned for sure. I'm not writing that one. Thankfully, I've got like less responsibility on that one. I'm just kind of doing more producing, like archive producing and stuff. But Incubus, I'm sure it'll get represented. We interviewed Eli Roth and a couple of other like kind of more contemporary filmmakers and stuff. So some of Robert's newer stuff definitely gets mentioned. And I know there's like a Rhode Island connection to that film too, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Carl V. Dupree was the writer.
That's right. Okay.
He's a friend of mine. We go back a long ways. And he wrote a couple of Hellraisers, Prophecy, and he did that movie. And it was filmed in Cranston.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So it was a big like Rhode Island thing. They did the convention here where they did the whole panel, and he got to be on the panel. He did Detroit Rock City too. Everyone knows Detroit Rock City. He wrote that. Yeah. So it was really cool. And I got like the inside scoop on that. We meant to have a horror movie night with him showing that film and having a Q&A afterwards, but it fell through for some reason. Then 2020 happened and obviously
everything fell through.
Yeah. So we didn't get to do it this year, but hopefully we could do that because that's it's a Rhode Island thing. Anything that comes out of Rhode Island, it's like, oh, it's Rhode Island.
Yeah. So Incubus, I'm sure will definitely be represented in some way. I'm not writing that one, so I'm not entirely sure like what's kind of made it and what hasn't, but for sure that'll be a part of it. Yeah, I remember that. That's right, because my buddy who I did the Pet Sematary documentary with, he does a lot of work for the Road Show, and Robert Englund was in town. I remember him talking about that a few years ago, like when they were promoting that movie, and yeah, that's super cool. I had forgotten about the Rhode Island connection though. That's awesome.
Cool, man.
All right. Well, so yeah, John, thanks for coming on, man, and sharing everything. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Hearing about these projects.
I appreciate the support and, letting me ramble. And like I said before, I messaged one of you guys, like to chat with like hometown guys means a lot. So it's super cool too. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we look forward to you joining us back in Rhode Island at some point when you make your way over here, and hopefully when things get back to normal a little bit, or if it's safer times, we can kind of get together in person. And
count me in. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that'll be great. And for everyone listening, make sure to check out Unearthed and Untold. Hopefully Pennywise will be out. John, when did you say Pennywise you're anticipating that release?
Definitely this year. I know that's pretty vague, but probably this summer. We're just kind of going through a lot of like the legal stuff and kind of all the other post-production stuff. It's not fun. That takes a ton of time. So, but this summer, I think for sure.
All right. Yeah. Well, people will have that to look forward to, and as well as a Snapper doc. And we look forward to seeing what else you have to come, man.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. This was fun.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
And all right, guys. So thanks for listening. So signing off. This is Dave.
This is Brandon.
This is Joshua.
This is John. Watch out for those snapping turtles, baby.
Have a good night.
Take it easy. Also, email that too. I can throw it in there.
You guys want me to take my shirt off?
Josh, you can go, actually.
See you later.
Campopiano.
Campopiano. Hey, it's John Campopiano.
John Campopiano.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to say.
John Campopiano.
Campopiano. Campopiano.
Oh, what am I doing?
Nah, don't worry about it, Josh.
You want me to do the hook or?
Nah, it's all right, dude. We're good.
Fucking guy. Fuck you, Dave.
Oh man.
Maybe Angel's around.
How, man? How? He's got his own podcast to worry about.
Did you change the name of the 2020 Sucks?
Yes.
Why?
I just did it.
Dude,
I figured.
It's a fact. 2020 was terrible, dude. I was reading that. I was like, 2020 was horrible, dude.
Because
there's no second guessing, dude. That was the worst year of the world. That is going down in the Guinness Book of Records as the worst year.
You guys could change it. You could change it all back if you want.
I got a news alert that 400,000 people died. Something crazy. It was a bad year, dude.
Not for horror movies.